And we are live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining in on episode 6. Today we have our good friend, the bearded tribalist. I can make sure I don't look at this backwards.
Tribal beardless.
Yeah, give a little variation on his name. But he's joining us once again. Tonight we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to do a shorter podcast. We're going to try to go with some shorter content going forward. On occasion, we might do a long one, but we want to get down to the nitty gritty and funnel in on some certain topics. So uh, I'm sure everyone has heard of the Hard 75 routine or project or fitness challenge and what have you. So myself and Brendan and Aaron, we're all starting to have conversations about how we could pair that with tasks or components of preparedness. Um, in the past, we've mentioned sometimes people don't want to do certain things in preparedness because it's not the sexy stuff, you know. It's not running and gunning, or it's not, building this or that. But they're very important. And one of the issues we talked about in episode 5 was area studies, which some people really dig, and other people are like, eh. So we tried to pair that with some other things to bring some interest to it. So we're going to do that same thing here tonight because fitness and nutrition and hydration are extremely important for just general lifestyle. They're even more so important in preparedness. One, for you to do certain things in preparedness, and then, God forbid, something happens and we are in an emergency situation, we need to be in good shape. I'm not talking Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean Claude Van Damme shape, okay, with six packs. Just got to have some endurance, some stamina, some flexibility, and just some perseverance and be able to withstand certain things, as PJ and Bear would say, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And there are, two important ways to get uncomfortable, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. One is getting in shape, and two is combatives. So we are going to talk about those tonight and how they relate to each other. All right. So Aaron's going to start off the conversation. All right, give it a shot, Aaron.
All right. So I'm just talking a little bit briefly about backgrounds, so people know where I'm coming from. I don't consider that myself that special of a guy. I joined the Army at 19, and I promptly injured my back at Fort Benning, Georgia, in the summer of 2006. I didn't even complete training. I didn't get to go anywhere, do anything interesting. I thought Uncle Sam was going to sponsor me on a permanent vacation to kill interesting people and go interesting places while I did it. Life didn't turn out that way. I ended up having to rehab my back myself, and kind of make my own way. So most of the training that I've gotten has been as a civilian. It's not a side effect of being involved with bouncing or security or being in the Army. Um, so I like to think of training for regular guys. It's not the super tactical, let's speed rock out of a holster in zero point 0.2 seconds on Instagram and then, use video editing software to chop off a few frames, just make ourselves seem that much faster. So, in that first episode that I talked about the 4 basic areas of preparedness or self-reliance to me, is food, water, shelter, and security. And this combatives falls under security to me, as does fitness and nutrition. Um, so kind of breaking down combatives, I like to look at things as a complete combatant. Um, to borrow a phrase from some guys I admire up in Georgia that are training, they have a series of classes called the complete combatant. Um, but there's certain basic skills that I think there's an easy way to establish a minimum acceptable standard for yourself that's not hard to meet. So I break things down into, unarmed, which for me is basically grappling and striking, but the unarmed work that I do and focus on is all informed, instead of by competition, it's really focused on um, dealing with problems in a weapons-bearing environment or a weapons-based environment, to use a term of art from another training group called Shipworks. Um, somebody um, a weapon or tool that they may introduce into the fight, and you may or may not be aware of that. And then they also might have friends that have weapons or tools that they may introduce into the fight,
Mm-hmm.
and they may or may not let you know that that's about to happen. So for the grappling piece of it, just as a general thing, I like to see somebody be able to get up off of the ground if you are pushed, shoved, tripped, or sucker punched into falling without exposing yourself unnecessarily. Right? Protect your head. This is our computer. So if we get knocked out, we just become passengers.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also like to look at recovery from an unexpected assault for grappling. And that's if somebody comes up and tackles you or grabs you or punches you, how do you recover from that position? We had a kind of a famous case here locally about, I want to say 15 years ago. It might be a little bit longer at this point. You remember the Gibsonton Walmart thing, Dominic?
Man, that sounds familiar. Refresh me on that.
So we had a gentleman, I think he was in his 40s or 50s, and he was getting ready to go into Walmart. And this is back in the bad old days when Florida didn't have a statute that covered accidental exposure. Or, like you get out of your car and your shirt rides up over your gun and you flash everybody for a second, right? And then you fix yourself, because just get out of the car a little disheveled. So he was carrying strong side hip on his, same carry 4 o'clock that a lot of people do. And his shirt had ridden up over the back and he pulled it back, but somebody saw him in the parking lot. And that guy followed him into the Gibsonton Walmart. And when he was on the tile floor in the greeting area where everybody gets their shopping carts, most people are probably familiar with it, he heard somebody behind him shout, "Gun, gun, he's got a gun." And then that guy spear tackled him on the tile floor, and that's when his fight started.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a heck of a way to get rolling, isn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of, a lot of guys want open carry in Florida. Okay. And I have mixed opinions on it. But I'd want it just for the simple fact that you don't get in situations like that where you get for a technicality.
Yeah.
You're sprinting, your shirt rides up, and next thing you know, people are calling 911 or getting a cop, and then you're getting drawn on, and they're getting you on a technicality. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to prevent some overachiever from tackling you because they think everyone's an active shooter.
Yep.
At least from a legal perspective, don't get in trouble. And then when you got to retaliate against this guy, physically, because he's jumping, because you have no idea why this dude's tackling you.
Yep.
This is where I guess the combatives is really going to come in handy, whether it's Krav Maga or Jiu-Jitsu. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but.
Oh, no. It's absolutely. Those are the kind of questions that I ask people to think about when we're establishing what, in my opinion, and with the groups that I'm part of, is a common standard.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So minimum acceptable standard. If somebody comes up and spear tackles you from behind, how do you keep from bouncing your head off of the pavement so bad that you fracture your skull?
Yeah.
Right? Then how do you retain the tools that are on you?
Mm-hmm.
Then how do you turn around without unnecessarily exposing yourself? You don't want to just do one of these and turn around into a sucker punch that's coming, or you see a big pair of steel-toed work boots coming from your peripheral vision, And the last thing that you see is a pair of laces swing back and then start coming forward really, really fast, and it's getting really big quick.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, you kind of got
so
two things to worry about. One is the physical, lashing that you're getting, then also someone grabbing your firearm.
yep, yep,
So, um,
and that's I've heard from a lot of people over the years. I want to, or I don't need any of that grappling stuff. I don't need to do the combative stuff because I never let anybody get that close. And if we had to ask that guy whose shirt rode up over his firearm at that point, and like you can see the security footage if you look around for this fight. It is not technical. It is not pretty. It's like two octopus having a slap fight. It is gnarly, and they're on tile floor. Like bruises, concussions are happening. They're lucky they didn't split open. Like it gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about busting my head open on a tile Walmart floor
mm-hmm.
where the feet of the entire county may have trod. What's
Yeah.
on the bottom of those shoes that may be in my own human skin right now and bloodstream? Like, when I go to the ER, can they give me all the penicillin that they have? I don't want some of it. I want all of it. But I mean, those are real concerns. And rather than looking at this as a specific technique, and I'm a big fan of X martial art, you're a big fan of Y martial art. I'm just more positing like this is the scenarios that I think people should be able to deal with.
Yeah.
Or the scenarios that I think they should be conscientious about their training when they're designing their training programs. And, that's what they should have in mind when they're thinking of, oh, do I want to go throw 300 high kicks and do a kata 150 times tonight? Or do I want to have, a former Division I wrestler grab me by the ankles on a crash pad and scoop me up 50 times and see how I can, stay awake at that point. So things like that, being able to recover from a sucker punch, like I said, being able to recover from being grabbed. A lot of street crime right now, especially if it's multiples. They'll put the new guy in charge, and he's kind of like the sacrificial lamb. His job is to go and tie up your arms because you look at a lot of holdups. And if you're looking at an experienced crew, one of their big objectives is to stop you from moving your feet. Easy way to do that with a grown adult male or female is to get them in a grappling match.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to base that if it's a guy, in my experience, usually he'll bull into you and he'll push. If it's a girl, she may base, get a good stance and pull away. But either one of them have stopped moving their feet. Like both of them have done that. So if the idea is to kill your mobility and put you in a box, it's worked. So that's, some thoughts on that. Also, to be able to deal with someone who is standing over you and raining down blows on your head from a grappling perspective, and to deal with somebody who is sitting on your chest or stomach and hitting you. Those are all technical skills that don't take that long to learn, and they're pretty easy to pressure test.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning we had talked before the podcast tonight about guys having a narrative of what's in their head and who they are in a fight that maybe doesn't have a bearing in reality because it's not tested. Most well-adjusted or semi-well-adjusted adults do not fantasize about getting their butt kicked in a fight.
Mm-hmm.
We're all the heroes of our own story up here, right? Like I'm saving the damsel in distress, I'm slaying the dragon, gold, riches, and a castle and a hot chick are all mine. But real life doesn't always play out that well, So that's kind of where I'm coming from on grappling. And one of the things that's going to be in all of these segments is the absolute necessity of pressure testing. Once you've learned the skill, you need to take it off road and allow yourself to be put in enough stress safely. You don't want to get injured,
Mm-hmm.
but you do want to get that adrenaline dump. You do want to get that freak out moment. You do want to realize what happens when you're scared, right? For instance, for the sitting on the chest thing, a lot of times I'll put two focus mitts on, and they're big, thick pads. And you have your hands open, and I'll just paw at people,
Mm-hmm.
and you can figure out real quick, like, okay, you want to do all this counter punching and everything, but do you want to take both of your hands away from protecting your head while you do that?
Mm.
Like, what's your priority list here? You know, to me, I always have like stay conscious is number one.
Yeah.
Stay vertical,
Yeah.
right? Get mobility back.
Well, one thing I learned from, what little amount of time I did in boxing is you tire out very quickly. I
Yeah.
mean, watch enough boxing matches and stuff like that. It takes less energy to move and, bob and weave. And then those guys are just throwing haymakers and just uh, punch, 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 punch. It all expends energy. And then the guy's tired out. And the next thing you know, the dude that's been blocking the whole time and the fight's boring explodes because he
Yep.
has all his energy left over. A few
That's,
years, yeah.
I was gonna say one of the things I noticed in jiu-jitsu when I first got in there, I had another dude crawling all over my head, and I couldn't breathe, so I'd freak out and I'd try to push him off and just use raw strength and not technique,
Yeah. Well,
and then I'd pass out.
oh, well, a few years ago, I had a bunch of my buddies. I set up a bunch of like gymnastic mats that I had bought for my daughters to practice gymnastics and stuff like that. I laid them out in the backyard, and one of my friends had been training in jujitsu, so he came over, and we were all practicing. Someone's on top of you. How do you get off? Okay, and a couple different moves, and then some of my friends wanted to feel like what it was like to get choked out. you
Yeah.
know, and struggling until you lock the arm, and then it just lights out.
Yep.
I tapped out before I was passing out, but some of my friends wanted to experience it, which I don't fault them, because it kind of gives you a test to where you just got to do it. Some
Yeah.
guys can be strong and hold their breath or clench their shoulders and stuff like that, but soon everything's going to go to a buzz and then blackout. You know.
So there's chokes and there's strangles.
Uh-huh.
Strangles like occlude the airway, and then chokes. I think I have that right. Sometimes I conflate the two in my head, but chokes actually, impinge on your carotids, and they cut off the blood supply to the brain.
Yeah.
The nasty thing about chokes is they often don't feel bad. Like I could have someone choking me behind me right now, and I would still be able to talk to you because he's not doing anything to my airway.
Right.
And then you just go to sleep, and all of a sudden you're waking up, and you don't even realize when the sleep happened.
Yeah.
It just,
It just happened.
Yeah.
And then I've seen lots of videos where tough guys go and challenge dudes, and they just pull some jujitsu moves on them, and then they're like moving their
Yeah.
feet, because the guys practice, and they roll it, and they get lights out. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. That's I've got a buddy of mine that has a martial arts school over in Ocoee. Hey Brett, if you see this. But he talks a lot about how for his martial arts stuff, that is part and parcel of learning to enough to advance is to be able to be a mat medic and help guys set bones and everything like that. So
One of the things I've never done jujitsu other than messing around with my friends a little bit. I did train with Krav Maga for a while, and I love doing Krav Maga. I love doing kickboxing, and it was fun to do it. Um, I think jujitsu has a lot of value, um, and I think all military, all law enforcement, um, maybe even some paramedics and firefighters should have some, because you never know when a patient's going to go crazy. So I mean, and if you want to justify it, it's like non-lethal restraint. I mean, there's certain moves in jujitsu that you can sit there and, to me, jujitsu is like someone's coming at you and you pull some moves and you're restraining them, and so assistance can come around. Where Krav
Yeah.
Maga is different, where you're striking hard, you're striking fast, and then you're getting away. You
Yeah.
know, both have a place, both have a value, um, and they both take training, and they are so different than, say, a traditional martial arts like karate or taekwondo, which takes skill and perseverance as well, but a lot of it is formed. And how practical is it in a street fight? Well, against me, I don't know anything. Pretty practical, okay.
Yeah.
But you can, the ROI on Krav Maga, okay, is a much better investment than doing Taekwondo or karate, in the sense that you can scale up with some basic things very quickly in Krav Maga. Um, you not may not be the most effective person with it, but at least you can learn the stuff. Now, I've seen people with high belts in all kinds of forms, and I'm like, you don't look like someone like Bruce Lee, or some people that are teaching the class where they're very crisp, and some of it might be a little performative too. But I mean, guys that were teaching me Krav Maga, he was doing martial arts since he was like 5 years old, and
Yeah.
he was a Marine, so uh, he was good in a lot of different things. And the Grand Master was former Army, and he had been doing martial arts since he was a kid. All his sons had done it, so they were very good at what they were doing, and they knew multiple forms. Um, but I think my point being is that when you learn the traditionals like karate or taekwondo, and you become, efficient at it, and then you take on like a Krav Maga or maybe a jujitsu, which is a lot more in another direction. I think you can better appreciate and understand what's, meat and potatoes out of it, and get some
Yeah.
people scaled up.
Well, and to me, like everything I've ever studied has some fairly large holes in it. A lot of modern jujitsu, as it's practiced these days, has really gone towards the tournament circuit and competition. So they've gotten away from, if they ever knew about it in the first place, understanding that weapons may be involved in the environment that people are using this out in the street in. And they're, if they pay it lip service at all, they pay it lip service to the point of looking at it and going, okay, well, this is what I would do with a knife. So it's definitely what, a crackhead at 3 o'clock in the morning over in Ybor City, in Florida will do with a knife. And it's like, no, you don't know that guy. You don't know his culture. You don't know what skill set he may have or may not have, acquired over the years. You don't know who might have trained him, or if
Mm-hmm.
it's just off on the job training. You don't know what kind of drugs he's whacked on and how that might affect his mindset. He might be trying to carve your face off because he thinks it's melting and it's got acid monkeys crawling out of it.
Yeah,
Like, or he might not feel pain because he's on PCP or, a bad batch of methamphetamines or, another designer drug coming out of somewhere, outside of the US.
yeah,
Um, with the crowd guys that I worked with, like a lot of them were really good at inoculating to stress. They were really good at building a base. And then a lot of it was more about building the confidence into the practitioner that after your initial blitz, your opponent's just going to go limp. But I'm here to tell you, I've hit people and just seen them grin at me. And like, I don't have soft hands. Like they're not made out of pillows. And I've been hitting people for most of my life. That's very disconcerting when you give somebody your best shot and you just see, you
yeah.
know,
and
come
tweak it.
back at you. And if you're sold a bill of goods that it confidence, like in jiu-jitsu, I heard every fight will go to the ground. That was one of the mantras that they had. And Krav Maga, like when I trained with those guys, it was our skills are paid for in blood. Whose blood? When? Are we talking about the 6 Day War back in the 60s? Because they had to revamp the entire Krav system after that because it sucks so bad. Like, if it's karate or taekwondo, it's like you guys used to have some of this stuff way back in the day because it was an art for warriors by warriors, but everybody got more focused on fancy gis and nice promotions and big titles and fancy paperwork that the art kind of lost its roots. And that's why, like, going back and having an agnostic system of things that you can look at and have these as objective standards.
Yeah.
You need to be able to deal with falling from, for whatever reason you were falling face forward, for whatever reason you were falling face, backwards, side to side, and then ungainly falls that are just not pretty. They're not well choreographed. You're not going to do your nice little break fall where you slap the ground. Like, you need to learn how to salvage the best of a bad situation and understand that, you may have to decide in the moment, in a split second, is it worth splattering my head open over this pavement, or is it worth shattering an elbow?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people negate the fact of their opponent having size, whether it's height or girth. Okay.
Yeah.
Size being, height and arm length. Okay. So if they're tall and you're short, you can be really good at something, but if you can't reach, or when you reach, a lot of the oomph is not there, then you're in a lot of trouble. You get a guy that's got he's tall and he has long arms, especially any kind of you're trying to throw punches.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to hit you before you hit him. I don't care how hard you're hitting. But then you got guys that are very bulky and girthy. One of the things I hated when I was training in Krav Maga is that I always ended up with the big guys.
Yeah.
Okay. And not to say there's not a value to that, but not in the beginning. So I don't need a big giant dude to be my sparring partner when I'm trying to learn how to execute whatever move I'm doing. Okay. To me, it's a physical and a logical thing, a psychological thing. And I'm sitting there going, man, I don't care how hard I hit this guy.
Yeah.
He's going to brush it off, And then when they're coming the other way, then it's like really if you haven't built the confidence yet and you're holding that pad for that guy to sit there and kick it, because kicking has so much more power than punching anyways, or you're trying to hold the bag, and if you ain't got your feet right or the arms and shoulders angled, that bag's coming right in your face,
Yep.
That doesn't really help for a lot of confidence to build up. But then on the flip side, I didn't like training with women either because they tended to be, smaller than I was. And then I just couldn't psychologically not hold back.
Yeah.
Because I was more hurting them than it was about me executing what I was doing. Now, that's a me problem, not a woman problem. But sometimes when you're doing these group training type things, I mean, you got to do what you got with what you got right there. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So that kind of touches on some related stuff that's maybe a couple levels above in concept, from just developing basic objective standards. But to me, a good instructor is going to study continuing education and adult education for the rest of their tenure. So I read peer-reviewed articles on neuroscience. I mean, it's not just the glasses. Like, I have these because I get headaches if I look at too much blue light. So,
I just thought you look smart.
Yeah, it's my Clark Kent look, right? It's Clark Kent with a beard. But when you're looking at a technique, there's a lot of showmanship that goes into instructors marketing their schools.
Right.
And they'll say, "Oh, look, you just tried this other technique from this other school, and look at how bad you were." So like, man, that was the third time I've done it. I could have told you I sucked at this before I left the house. Like, I didn't have to come here and give you any money or my time to tell you I suck at this. I know that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you like 30 reps to learn my technique. And then I've got my best student here, Jimmy, and he's going to attack and then freeze. And then you're going to get to execute my technique that you just got to practice 30 times under my personal, tutelage. And it's going to work amazing. And obviously, that means that what I'm teaching you is better than whatever crap you walked in here with. So you need to empty your cup and get good at this. And like, that's what, when I work with guys on a continuing basis, one of the modules that's fairly unique to our group, there's a couple of other ones that do it, but I haven't seen it done commonly, is learning how to learn. Yeah. And learning how to be a good training partner. My job as a training partner is not to always win.
Right.
And you'll see that when, like, especially if the technique hurts a little bit, you'll see guys start to cover up, or they'll start to zone, and they'll start to move. And it's like, dude, I'm tired of you kicking me in the thigh. Yeah, I'm gonna move. But my goal as your training partner is to create the best scenario and situation possible for you to learn the skill set with as much stress as appropriate to your level of mastery. Meaning that, like, if this is your first time seeing it, I'm not going to fight you on it. I'm going to throw you a slow ball, let you catch it, let you work. And then once you get a little bit better at it, I'll start adding in some pressure. I'll stop giving it to you. I might start varying my rhythm. And then once we get freed up and we're not just doing an attribute building drill, then I'll go in as like, okay, I'm actually still training you right now, but the cuffs are off. I can do whatever I want. So, you've been practicing against the left jab the entirety of today. I'm going to throw left, right, elbow, hammer fist, right, and then that left jab's going to come in again.
Yeah.
Like, now you have to worry about combination punches, but you are going to see the material and get to learn how to apply it in different contexts. And that's really underserved in just about every physical education environment that I've been in, with probably 4 or 5 exceptions. And I've been doing formal shooting for almost 15 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in martial arts for about 32 years. So 4 or 5 exceptions in that time.
Well, what I've noticed in the different trainings of different things that I've done, I always do better with one-on-one. And I mean, I'm sure most people do, but most of these commercial type training places for martial arts or whatever, they're group oriented. The logistics and the economics kind of dictate that to make it affordable and to spoon feed it. But it really does a disservice in the sense of that an instructor really can't adjust you enough in a session to make the training effective. So I keep thinking you're like, I kept feeling like I was in a deficit because there's like 15, 20 people in there and they were walking around and they're like, okay, raise your elbow and keep doing whatever you're doing. And then you go on to the next person, but then they go on to the next drill. And that class is for an hour and then they're mixing in PT and stuff like that and trying a bunch of different moves where when I would do private instruction for 30 minutes, one-on-one or two-on-one, I was able to pick up things quicker, get a lot more adjustments from the instructor. It was more personalized, or differentiated. We use an educational term, and I was able to scale up, and I was happy, and I was willing to pay.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's cost prohibitive for people to do have a coach or training. Like when you go to say a Crunch gym, I mean, they want to give you a free lesson because they want to have personal training sessions. They want to charge 60, 70, 80 bucks for a training session. And they basically watch you. And they're on their phone half the time. Okay, do this. And and I get knowledge and experience have a value. But I don't really think that's an effective means that way. I mean, if you got the money, more power to you. Um, but I remember one time a young guy was trying to, get me to do private lessons, and I'd already paid, and then the person had left. So I never really went to a gym before. It was the first time I did lessons, and I said, to be honest, I really don't want to sit there because I was going to try to get a refund. And I was like, I really don't want to have a personal trainer. I can go do everything you're telling me already. I said, what I want is someone to be my pad guy, pad man.
Mm-hmm.
Teach me boxing. That's what I want. And this guy happened to know how to. He was really good with kickboxing. So
Mm-hmm.
I used the rest of my sessions with him, and we broke them up in 30-minute segments. And this is, obviously not at the Krav Maga school. And I learned a lot from this guy. So
Yeah.
he's getting paid, and I'm doing what I want to do. And I'm not paying you all this money so you could make me sweat doing this exercise, that exercise. I can do that before or after I'm with you. So it's about value, you know?
Yeah, it wasn't until I was in my late 20s or probably early 30s that I could start affording private lessons. And, when I was first starting out, I used to get really put out by that that same mass teaching methodology that you were talking about earlier, where
Yeah.
like half of the class is a conditioning drill. If I wanted to do a million burpees, I don't need to leave my house. They're
Yeah.
free. I can do as many of them as I want at home. They don't charge me $130 a month to sweat.
Yeah.
Um, but then you'd go into technique of the day or a couple techniques of the day. You might get some critiques, and then you go into sparring or free rolling at the end, and that's going to be 15 or 20 minutes after you're already gassed. Everybody goes, they sweated, they talk about what a great class they've had. Hey man, fist bump, see you next time,
Yeah.
and be back on Monday. Um, and I in my early 20s, I was really kind of put out by a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but when I started engaging with the material more and actually going in and like, okay, I know I have bad ADHD. That's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
How do I learn? What is the best way for me to intake information?
Yeah.
And who's in charge of me learning? Like I talk about at one point, I've been all over the place teaching edge weapon stuff. Edge weapons combatives, both from I'm the guy with the knife to I'm dealing with somebody who has parity, right, where we both have an
Mm-hmm.
impact or a touch weapon, to I'm dealing with a lack of parity, which is like he's unarmed and I'm armed, or he's armed, I'm unarmed, or maybe he has a gun and I have a knife. Like all those are different scenarios and stuff. And when I started looking at that, I was like, man, there's a lot of the stuff you deal with in the same way, right? But like if I went to the worst knife class that I've ever been to um, about 8 or 10 years ago, and this guy was absolutely awful. Had a great resume, and I drove across the state to pay $100 to train with him, and I was so pissed in the bathroom. I went out to grab a smoke, like I was just livid, and I remember thinking, I drove 2 hours to hear this dude's war stories and BS and see a bunch of terrible techniques. I need to get something out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, regardless of if I leave right now, I flush $100 down the toilet in my 2 hours to get over here.
Yeah.
Like, what can I get out of this? How can I salvage this? So, that was kind of like an epiphany moment for me of like, I'm in charge of my own training.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I ever need this stuff, he's not going to be anywhere around. He's going to have my money. He's going to, spend it on Mai Tais or martinis or whatever it is he drinks, cold beer. And he's going to be laughing his butt off. And I'm going to be the one that's, duking it out with some dude trying to stick me in the taint with a rusty knife. Like, so I need to be more invested in my success and my learning than he is. So that was kind of like learning negative space learning. And it's like, oh, everything I do is different than this guy. Why is that? Can I better articulate it? Can I teach it to somebody better? And I mean, that was probably the best worst $100 I've ever spent training. Like
Yeah.
this is so terrible, you
Well,
know.
and there's only so much theory and a lot of stories that different people when they're doing presentations they bring about. I mean, it only more filler than anything else.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid and I was doing some boxing with PAL, the Police Auxiliary League, and me and this other kid, we were training and training, and then the big day came for our first whatever round or 2 rounds. Oh my god, I didn't last 30 seconds because once I got hit for real, okay, and you got these giant gloves on your little hands and everything. I'm just like blocking. And this kid's just whacking me around, and I turned around and I'm getting hit, and I'm like, okay. And I didn't box again until I was probably an adult. But I got
Yeah.
a similar lesson when I was in the Marines, when I was in boot camp, where it was kind of a better environment to train because you didn't worry about hurting anybody else. You wanted to hurt somebody else. Okay. And
What was
we would,
expected? There, it was expected. What makes the grass grow, right? Blood, blood, blood. You know?
and you do pugil sticks, and we got different turns, and I preferred being by myself fighting two guys. It was easier based on how they were laying it out. But when you're two guys, you got two different problems to worry about. You're trying to hit this guy and not get hit, okay? But you also got to make sure you're not getting hit by your partner or hitting
Yep.
him. There's too much going on. So I like being just an individual guy for that. And then you just don't have the fear of, and you're young and you feel invincible. I mean, we were kicking the crap out of each other pretty much everything we were doing the whole time in boot camp. So, um, and everyone wants to wrestle. No one knows how to wrestle. And basically everyone's, suplexing, just scooping everybody, plopping them down. And, it was fun, you know? And I think a lot of teenage boys do that stuff just in general, where you can't do that stuff in the civilian world. Maybe a little, if you're doing jujitsu and you teach them skills, and maybe wrestling, you can scoop somebody up and then toss them. Um, but these days, I would be more nervous about doing it, um, just because I've seen people get hurt from it. And here's the interesting thing. So when I was in college, all the guys, they knew I was like, oh, you were in the Marines. So every time we're farting around in the frat house, they always wanted to challenge me. You know,
Mm.
it wasn't like I was a big dude or I was aggressive or anything. It was just like, but I was in the Marines, so they all had something to prove, every shape and size. But I was so worried, about, you know, if there's one thing in the Marines, it's just they teach you to react. Okay. And I was so worried about not being able to control myself, and this is not combat. This is not real. So you get trained a certain way. It's like, I couldn't find a middle ground. So a lot of times, once it got to a point where I saw what I needed to do, I just kind of relinquished because I didn't want to hurt my friends. You know,
Yeah.
um, you ever kind of been in that scenario, like in the civil when you're doing the training? That's the reason I'm bringing it up because you could have a student that might not know how to manage their aggressiveness, not be aggressive enough or go too much. How do you find that sweet spot when you're training somebody?
Usually, like we call that getting froggy at a seminar, and you have people challenge you all the time, and it's something that like, especially when you're acting as the training partner, the Japanese call it the uke.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that's feeding the other guy so he can learn the technique. everybody wants to take a shot off the instructor. And, I remember that was a big thing when I was bouncing, wear a red shirt when I was bouncing at Coyote Ugly, or wear a green shirt when I was bouncing at the Dallas Bull. And it's like, dude, you'll talk about the night that you fought a guy with a red shirt on for the rest of your life. And for me, this is like my Tuesday. It's a Saturday night. If you'll
Yeah.
let me, I'll forget about you the minute that you leave here. I promise. Like, you just don't matter that much.
Yeah.
But you do still have to protect yourself. And for me, I protect those people if it's at all possible. I've had some people try to sucker punch me, or they'll go into the technique and that, like, they're working the drill as it's showed so that we can build the attribute and get the skill in. And they're like, but what if I do this? And they'll do something weird that's usually stupid. Fortunately for me, I've been doing this long enough that even if they think it's really creative and innovative, I've seen it a couple of times usually. Everybody has two arms, two legs, a head, and a butthole somewhere. I haven't run across anybody that is lacking those parts yet that I've trained with.
Yeah.
So that means that people move in predictable patterns, and you can sometimes try to, or kind of spot them a little bit too, when you see you're getting a little squirrely on me there, bud. You're acting a little weird. Oh, you're thinking about it. You're gonna take a shot at me, like when we do this. You're gonna ask me for some correction, and then try to knock my mouth guard out, or something like that. And it's like, all right, man, whatever, it's fine. Let's get it over with so you can get it out of your system so we can get back to learning. And I'll usually try to bring those people over to the side so it doesn't make a big deal, because, like, the other weird thing is I've seen it interrupt classes where guys will go in and they'll want to talk about what a badass you are for way too long. I was like, dude, you didn't come here to hear my war stories. You didn't come here to hear what a hard case I am. And I got to be honest, if I just met you, or even if I've known you for years, it probably doesn't really matter to me a lot if you want to stroke my ego. I prefer for my wife to do that. It has a whole different impact.
Yeah.
Like, another hairy, sweaty dude telling me how awesome I am. It's a little weird after the first time, man. So let's spool it back. Let's remember why we're here. Let's get back on topic, and let's start training again. And that's, I guess I'm a little different. I've never really tried to build up the cult of personality when I'm training people. Some guys thrive on that. They have to have their little, um, some of my cop friends call them holster sniffers. Some of my guys that I know that are cool guys in the Army, like Army Rangers, call them tab lickers or tab sniffers. They're like groupies for a band. It's like, oh,
Wow.
you're so awesome. You're so amazing. You're such a hard case. I'm like, do you still put your pants on one leg at a time? Like, oh, that's Johnny. Yeah, he is a hard case, but, like, I've talked him through 3 divorces, and he's getting ready for number 4 because he really shouldn't have married this one either. Like, so I know he's a normal guy. And that's where, like, when you're evaluating who to train with, I think stuff like this is really important to be aware of, because it's really easy to become sucked in by a cult of personality.
Yeah.
And I know we kind of got away from the objective standards and scenarios and what are they, but I think this is really important too, especially if you're new to this stuff and you really don't know what you're looking at or what you're looking for. Like, your BS detector is not finely tuned and calibrated after years of doing this stuff.
Yeah.
Going in and being able to say, hey, look, this is marketing. I know this is marketing. This I'm going to study Krav Maga because I think there's stuff that I can learn from it. But at the end of the day, I need to be able to look myself in the mirror and be honest with myself and go, I am not a kosher commando. So whatever the IDF does is only as interesting to me as my instructor's ability to help me apply it to my situation. Right? Like, if they're cutting heads off and putting them on stakes over there, that's fine. But I'm Bob from accounting. I'm not a kosher commando. You
Yeah.
know,
And
I don't have a Brazilian accent. Like,
well, it brings up a good point because Krav Maga was first deployed into IDF and everything, and you're dealing with a different kind of student. These guys are all, I mean, it's mandatory service over there, so you're dealing with mostly young people. They're probably in shape, okay, and they probably have a certain level of commitment and discipline during that time when they're learning it. We're transplanted over here into the West, into the U.S.
yeah,
Um, you got all a bunch of dudes with dad bods for the most part, and a bunch of women that need to get in shape too, and they're all trying to do Krav Maga because they want to learn self defense. Well, the women want to protect themselves from bad guys, where the dudes it's more of a masculine thing, and it's just like they want to be you know lay some hurting on some people, even though they're using the same techniques, and the mindset is different for the mom versus the dad. And then you have the kids that come in to do it. And to me, a lot of times that's like a lot of the other forms where they're teaching routine.
yeah.
And so, like my daughters took gymnastics at a place in Tampa, the floors, when they were smaller, 6, 7 years
Hmm.
old.
Great
And
place for a young kid to be, either gender.
oh yeah, and they had a great experience there. And but one thing that I noticed, because I'd never seen anyone really train in gymnastics, is the kids would all start at one station, and then when they went from station to station, they all had their hands up above their head like this. I forget why they do it exactly this way, but I think it probably has something to teach them routine,
Hmm.
you know. And maybe I can't remember exactly, but maybe it's because they're little kids, so they're not like so they stay focused. So they're picking their nose like they're doing on the soccer field if they're too young, or they're touching each other because they're fooling around. So it makes sense why they would
Yeah.
do it, but even though it doesn't have any practical application in actually doing gymnastics, it's a good tool to use while you're training people to do it.
I did
Um,
tons of children's ministry growing up. If you don't give a little boy something to do with his hands, he
yeah,
will find something to do with his hands. And about 95% of the time, it's been my experience that you don't want him to do whatever he decides to do with his hands on
yeah,
his own. Hey, picking a nose is like a best case scenario.
on a good day, right?
Yeah.
Well,
So,
so the point I was bringing up with this, they're teaching them, like a precursor and basics and discipline and routine. I think a lot of, I know I had a challenge when I was learning martial arts because I took, what do they call it? Um, Steven Seagal used to do it. Uh,
Aikido.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And a good friend of mine, an ex-Marine, he's a black belt in it and stuff. I never trained with him, um, but that was fun. And I don't have to using basically it had its traditional forms you're doing, but you're basically using other people's weights. And Steven Seagal made it really look cool, okay, in all his movies. Um,
Yeah.
but with all these forms, you need nutrition, fitness, flexibility, to do it. So I kind of like let's transition to that. So and you can even apply something similar to if you're doing tactical training on a range, you know?
Well, real quick, if we can just run through the rest of those objective things, because I think it might be an interesting deal for a couple people. I'll run through them real fast.
Yeah.
Um, so we did grappling, and it was learn how to fall, learn how to get back up, learn how to get somebody over off of top of you, learn how to disengage if somebody grabs you. For striking, learn how to strike without hitting yourself, learn what tools are appropriate for what target, learn how to generate power, and then learn how to strike correctly from odd angles where you're not able to prepare and be non-telegraphic with your striking.
Yeah.
Five things real quick. For edged weapon stuff, Learn how criminals use knives and how different criminals from different cultures and regions of the world use knives. We are
Yeah.
a country of immigrants and we import immigrants from everywhere. If you're in the US, it would behoove you to learn how other cultures might be trying to enrich you with more than just their food. Um, Learn how to choose a good tool and how to have that tool and access it under pressure when you're not given all the time in the world to clear out your holster, and then learn how to retain your tool. And then you can learn a little bit about, hierarchy of targets and everything like that. For firearms, pistol stuff, we talked about it earlier. Get a pistol, ideally in a common service caliber that's issued to a lot of different groups, preferably in a weapon that's carried by those groups because it's going to have undergone a lot of testing and is probably going to have, all machines have problems, but knowing where the problems are is completely different than finding new ones yourself that are, unique to you under
Yeah.
stress.
Yep.
Um, Learn how you can carry that every day. Practice clearing your cover garment, getting it out. Practice retention and access under pressure, under fighting scenarios, right? Which that takes you back to your combative stuff. Before I can pull out my cool blaster, I need to make sure that I create space or close and control so I don't get knocked out, shivved up, whatever the problem is that I'm dealing with, or I don't end up fighting over my tools with you. And then kind of par time based on the tool or drill and reactionary gaps and everything. I look at being able to employ your pistol from concealment, put at least two shots in a 3x5 card at 7 yards in 2.1 seconds or less, right? With rifle, being able to make a very accurate shot, 20 yards or so, being able to shoot minute of torso at 200 yards, understanding how to clear jams and malfunctions, right? And then with shotgun, understanding what your specific shotgun barrel will do because there is no standard on making shotgun barrels. They're
Yep.
just a extruded or forged or rolled tube that you can have two with the same lot number have completely different patterns with the same load and the same lot number of ammunition having completely different patterns. I've watched it happen on the range. Understand how it goes with buckshot and slugs, and then understand what actually is borne out by forensic studies in the U.S. on what is a real self-defense load with a shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was carrying number 4 turkey loads for a while. A lot of people were worried about over penetration with buckshot. Those are real concerns.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a lot of forensics evidence of somebody coming in and his back's got a bunch of pimples on it from getting hit with a number 4 turkey load, and he walked into the ER because he was too itchy to go to bed that night and he drove himself there, that's not the performance I expect out of my shotgun. So those are just some ideas for people to develop their own training standards, whatever art, martial arts and crafts, or tactical guru they're going to study with, or even if they're just going to go to YouTube University because they don't have the money, or they have it but they don't want to spend it, or they don't have the time or the access, whatever. Like just some thoughts on that. So sorry, I wanted to get
No,
that
no,
out real quick.
it's good points, and it kind of actually brings up something. Normally, I don't like to reference movies or shows because it's choreographed and it's not real. But I have to say, because Keanu Reeves is such a disciplined and dedicated uh, artist in what he does, whether it comes to martial arts, weapons training, and what have you. Some of the scenes in the John Wick series, the movies, I think are a good example to show where you're marrying the interaction between combatives, weapons, blades, blunt instruments. in a sense that stuff is high speed, intense, unpredictable, and extremely physically demanding.
Yeah.
Okay. Now it's still a movie, but I think guys that, and I never went to combat, okay, but I would guess that some guys that have gone to combat, and even just shooting and moving in a firefight, brings up some of the things where, you got the psychological, the physical, and then, if you get to close quarters combat, I don't know how much the GWAT guys had to do the hand to hand per se versus guys in Vietnam with the jungle scenes and going into tunnels and stuff like that. WWE,
Hand to hand was actually huge in the GWAT. There's actually a couple of Pentagon studies about how unarmed combatives morphed through it all. Because when you're doing house to house stuff, you might come around a blind corner or go through a room and somebody's got their little spider hole in the wall
yeah,
and he creeps out behind you. And, all you're going to hear is Aloha snack bar. And then he's trying to stick you with a knife or, pull the tab on his suicide vest or press a dead man switch or
yeah,
shoot you with your own gun,
a
So
lot of
that's,
things going on, and your adrenaline's
yeah.
going. So you might get that extra boost of energy from the adrenaline, but you're going to crash.
Yep.
That adrenaline is not going to last forever. This is where your endurance and your physicality, physically and mentally, comes in. We're not in a DWAT situation at this point, but
Not yet.
not yet. But how many times do we see videos on YouTube and Twitter mostly because that's where to get everybody emotional, of people getting jumped or groups
Yeah.
of people interacting and fighting and stuff like that. And I think your average person doesn't understand that could be you. You could just be a bystander. You're not even trying to be involved. And then a fight breaks out with two people, and then people are getting shoved and
Yeah.
moved, and you're reacting to that.
Do you remember the knockout game? You remember
Yes.
that at all?
Yeah.
Around 2010, 2012, a lot of inner city urban youths were going around and they were picking targets that were um, unlikely to fight back.
Yeah.
So a lot of elderly people, a lot of people, looking down at their phones, a lot of people with headphones on, people that were distracted, coming or going into or out of a place, getting into their car, unloading groceries. Like they wanted you to be distracted because they wanted to come over and knock you out, and then their friends would film it, and that'd be a lot of street cred. But I was talking with a buddy of mine in South Africa, and he's like, dude, it doesn't matter what kind of situation you're in when you win the lottery of violence. Like, if that's your day, does it matter if you got blown up in the GWAT or if some 16-year-old, 300-pound dude came over and tried to knock your block off?
Yeah.
Like, is your head going to know, oh, well, at least I wasn't blown up?
Yeah.
It's a grown man. He's 16 years old, but, at least it wasn't blown up. So it's really not that big of a deal. No, you can still freaking die.
Yeah.
Like, and you're just as dead if you get hit by an errant round. When we used to do the inner city missions work, when I did that with my family over in Ybor and out in Tampa, I remember patching bullet holes in the hood because drug dealers had fights over a corner the day before or the night before rather.
Yeah.
And talking to some of these grandmothers in this matriarchal society that have all these babies running around, they're like, yeah, I grabbed my kids and I pushed them all face down because they were shooting up with everything with AKs.
Yeah.
Well, and
Well,
it's like, oh yeah, that is about a 7.62 by 39 hole.
yeah.
But hey, at least you weren't in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
I mean,
my kids, drive a lot of what I do when it comes to certain kinds of training. And I remember when they were little, we used to play a game that I made up called Abandoned Ship.
mm-hmm.
And it was the practice for me and them. So for me, we all get in the water. I mean, literally, we're on the edge of the pool, and I pull everybody off. And I had to be able to tread water with my three kids and still be able to figure it. I had to figure it out. One, they got to
Yeah.
learn how to hold on to me in a way to where they don't, float away or drown, but not too much to where I can't operate.
Yep.
So that was a challenge that I made for myself. And then I used to try to go up and down like the ladders in the pool with them on me because I was trying to simulate to a point if there was a fire in the house, and I have like emergency ladders that because I have a 2-story house, and throw them out the window. And I'm like, man, how do I get my kids to learn how to hold on to me in a way that they don't let go and die, and they don't hinder me from carrying them down the ladder?
Yeah.
The average person may not think about those things, but I do. And the thing that's important about, and the reason I bring this example up to transition us over, is the fitness. And, right now, if we're at the mall or somewhere and there's a shooting or something, my first instinct is really to save my kids. It's not to
Hmm.
be Joe Hero and go tackle a guy unless they're like he's right there. But our instinct is duck down, get our kids down, take our kids,
Yeah.
run. You know, and my kids are not little anymore; they're teenagers, so they can run, but they might paralyze. So I might have to grab one, or one of them's injured. How far can I go with my kid or kids? Carrying them in any sense of the word. I could not go far. So that's kind of a motivational thing for me this summer. This is part of the Hard 75. I need to drop X amount of weight. I need to build up my endurance, because I could hike as it is, but I couldn't move my kids
Yeah.
in fast enough or in a way that I need to. So everyone's got to find their own motivation. So I
Yep.
start off, this next point is that whether it's for tactical training or for combatives and what have you, what would you suggest to someone that is trying to, hey, you know what? I make the decision. I'm ready to start getting in shape and talk about nutrition, conditioning, and hydration. So some tips and tricks, some pointers to go from zero to something, so it's a little bit more productive for someone to take on a training, whether it's tactical or hiking or whatever. It doesn't matter.
So the biggest thing for me is to figure out where you're at initially when it comes to fitness, and then start immediately. Procrastination has killed more fitness programs than anything else in the world, because I'll start on Monday or I'll start on New Year's Day. It's my New Year's resolution. I've known gym owners that had really good business plans that were a little ethically shaky, where they'd go, "Hey, everybody's signing up for New Year's resolutions. We're going to put you on electronic funds transfer, so it's just going to auto bill you every month. That keeps no hassle for you, no hassle for us, and we'll give you a free fitness session or three free fitness sessions. One of our personal trainers, and they'll help you get started on your New Year's resolution." And the personal trainer's job was to smoke the absolute dog crap out of the person going in there, and they'd be sore for weeks
Mm-hmm.
because they might have been an athlete in their late teens or early 20s, but at 45 years old and not being able to see their toes when they go pee, right, because of the belly sticking out,
Yeah.
they're not anymore. So they can still remember what they used to do. And as long as they don't have to admit to themselves by quitting and canceling the membership that they're never going to do that,
Mm-hmm.
they don't um, they don't ever cancel the membership. So my buddy is like, yeah, I have like 3,000 people that come to this little, gym that can hold 20 people at a maximum at a time, and it's empty. And I make bank, and I don't really have to work that hard. I just smoke the crap out of them when they come. I was like, you're a horrible human in some ways. But
Yeah.
so that kind of brings to the next point of like, start small and make the smallest possible increments that you can, that will build success on success, so you can build momentum to creating a new positive habit. If you want to be able to do 50 push-ups or 100 pull-ups in a day, or whatever your goal is, if you want to be able to scale a rope ladder with like three little ankle biters holding on to you, which I guess they might not be little small ankle biters anymore.
Yeah,
Uh,
no,
you,
more.
you talked about it like they're a little bit older, so you've got a little bit higher mark there. Um, but if that's what you want to do, figure out a way. Okay, I want to be able to do 5 push-ups. Okay, it starts with one. Go on YouTube, watch a video about how to do a proper push-up.
Hmm.
Like, guarantee you, there is more to that than the average person. Even I don't care if you did go through Paris Island or Fort Benning, Georgia, back in the 70s or 80s or whatever. Fitness changes,
Yeah.
and there's more and better innovations that come along. Learn how to do one correctly, and then do one 5 or 10 times a day until you can do two. Right? There, one of my favorite interviews was with a guy named Firas Zahabi. He's actually, I think he's Iranian or Iraqi, and he was the head trainer for a guy named George St. Pierre, who, if you know anything about MMA, was an absolute legend for way longer than most people managed to stay on top. And Zahabi was talking about volume and training. They said, let's say if you have, um, let's say I have you go do pull-ups, and you tell me 11 pull-ups is the most that you can do. If I hold a gun to your head and tell you, if you don't do a 12th pull-up, I will pull the trigger and kill you right here. And you know that means that you're a dead man, right? So you do 11 pull-ups, and then you drop. That's all your gas, and you're sore for 2 or 3 days. And then you come back and you do 11 more pull-ups, right? Because like we don't run our gym like that. It's like if 11 is your gun to the head number, I have you do 5, and then I have you do it Monday through Saturday. Take Sunday off to rest, and then if you feel like you can do 6, we're going to do 6 the next week. So rather than doing 22 pull-ups total in a week because we had to take 3 days off to rest, so we only got 2 pull-up sessions per week, right? I had you do 6 times 5. That's 30. So you just ramped up the volume, even though it doesn't feel like you're working as hard, but
Right.
you're doing something sustainable for yourself. And that's a huge deal when it comes to fitness on this. And then another one is competency and fitness does not necessarily translate across categories. I know people that are great runners, great power lifters, great ruckers, but if I have my powerlifting buddy run, he's going to die. Hey, he will gas out. Now the guy has a 445-pound straight bar bench. If he takes that to a marathon runner and just unracks the bar will fall. It will crush the marathon runner. They will die. A real death, not a figurative one from like gasping for air, because they just can't move the weight. So that kind of brings me into the developing what your reasonable expectations are for your own fitness related to what your goals are. I like to know somebody can do, 20 push-ups without stopping that are proper, right? I don't want to see little chicken neck stuff like, we used to ding people for when we did the APFT gradings, the Army Personal Fitness Test. Um, I don't want to see like little, just moving the elbows. I don't know if you saw the recent person that was, they had the push-up record, and they're only moving about 2 inches per push-up, but they got 6,000 of those in a day. I don't know what those are called, but I wouldn't call it a push-up.
Yeah, I don't even know how those
So
are effective.
it was a record. I guess if that's the standard they want to set, then you can be real proud of doing 6,000s of whatever that was. But none of the drill sergeants I came up with would have been okay with that. You would have just been there all day and night until you got it right, and then they'd start counting. They might have had some encouraging words in the meantime, but being able to run or fast walk 2 miles at a 17-minute mile an hour pace. That's a little bit slower than a jog. It's a fast walk, right? And these are just basic things that you establish, and then you can start adding weight. Okay, let's put a ruck on my back. You know, We both live in Florida. The heat is a huge deal.
Yeah.
I work on, in my day job, I work with quite a few athletes in tennis and baseball. The coaches are always ecstatic when they can get teams down here from up north because they're not heat acclimated. And the Florida Heat will do more to win the Florida team that game than any technique that they have. They're like, yeah, you just make it so he has to work for the first half of whatever our game is. And then in the next half, once he's gassed and you start seeing flush or, really excited if he stops sweating because that's when you know heat stroke is close,
Yeah.
right? You start freaking drilling him. And it's like, oh, that's dirty. And they're like, yeah, but it's so effective. And our guys feel really great about it because they've got this conditioning. It sucks to be out here in the heat, but I can promise like 100% win if we can get somewhere from, New Hampshire to come down here, So, and then like push-ups, the runs, the squats, being able to do 40 body weight squats correctly without stopping is a huge deal. And you can build these up as smaller sets throughout the day. If you're going to test yourself on that 40 number, maybe you need to do 10 sets of 8 throughout the day, And then the last one, and this is the one that I've seen in prepping. If you look at a group of preppers at a lot of these meetings, you're going to see a lot of people that are not actively fit. And when you start talking to them, you're going to hear about a lot of health issues.
Yep.
I'm not delusional enough to say, oh, if you're not a PT stud, you're going to die the minute the apocalypse hits. What I will say is you need to be aware of what your physical limitations are and have a realistic and tested plan to make it around that. One of my dear friends, when I started prepping, had COPD. And I mean, the guy would get winded going to roll himself another cigarette. Still smoking, but, he had COPD. And his bug out plan was to have one of those motorized bicycles with little tricycle wheels on the back of it. Like the little training wheels.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like, I am not pedaling anywhere. I can't even pedal to check the mail. But this thing's got a weed eater engine in it. I'm frail as all get out. I weigh like 110 pounds, and I can push a button. So I was like, oh, that makes sense, right? And so that's kind of the other one is like, don't give up, and don't let whatever physical challenges you have become a blanket pass for you to mentally allow yourself to not do anything.
Yeah, he improvised.
Right? Yeah. I can't deadlift 350 pounds right now. I'm still doing push-ups. Like, I've been out of formal weight training for almost a year right now because of a bad case of tendonitis in my elbow, which means I'm still doing squats. Like, body weight squats.
Yeah.
Can't go into the gym anymore. It's the dumbbells are too much of a temptation. But, that's, to me, that's kind of a more realistic take on fitness.
Yeah.
And it's putting fitness in its proper place. And it's also kind of like fitness for the rest of us.
Yeah.
What do you do if you're a 58-year-old grandmother who's never done a crunch a day in your life and you decided that you still want to be around and be able to dance at your kid's high school or your grandkid's high school graduation? Like, you got to start somewhere, man.
Yeah, start somewhere, do something. That's really the hardest part for anything. The hardest part is getting started.
Yeah.
And sometimes it helps for the people they get too fixated on the goal, and then they get scared. Well, adjust it. You can always add goals later.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal will be, let me just start. Let me do X amount of whatever, or let me just see what I can do. That's my goal, to get a baseline. And then inch it up. Sometimes it helps when people have accountability partners, or just a partner to do it, and it helps, develop friendships and stuff like that.
You can find friends on almost any shared hobby, but like I've seen a lot of people, because Hard 75 is new to me, but the concepts behind it about maintaining a rigid program, and like having a hard penalty for failure is not. That's been around in the fitness industry, probably since before we had recorded, um, records and history and words.
Yeah.
Um, I've seen so many people absolutely screw themselves out of the gate because they don't have a fitness background or a fitness base that they developed. They don't have an athletic body. And so they try to implement hard discipline where before there was nothing.
Yeah.
You see this on diets all the time. I'm going to cut out all processed white carbs, including sugar and flour and potatoes and pasta and rice. And it's like, dude, you ate at McDonald's 4 times a week last week. And for every week before that, for 10 years. It's going to be really hard for you to turn the tap off. Why don't you be a little bit more realistic and kinder to yourself and set yourself up for success and say, okay, for the first month, I want to cut my McDonald's visits by half and replace them with a healthy meal.
Yep. Because you got to learn the new way. There's so many different variables because your body is addicted to all the toxins in whatever you're eating, all the processed food. So the moment you sit there and stop drinking the soda, stop drinking the coffee, or pulling the McDonald's, your body's gonna scream at you physically. That's not counting the psychological issues of why you're using this stuff in the first place. Addiction is physical and mental, and it's dulling some kind of void in you. So even if you detox, you still got to deal with the psychological holes that you have in you, which I think most people don't really grasp of why they're having the challenges and stuff. Because your body's going to scream for it. Your lack of dealing with the holes are going to scream out. And this is where when some guys they get into addictions, they trade one fix for another.
Yep.
And sometimes
that's not bad.
No, and sometimes it's like say someone stops drinking and they go to AA and the big book and stuff like that. Well, part of their new fix, their accountability is going to AA. But then sometimes when guys like are in prison or they're in AA, they sit there and they find religion.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing, but you're trading one fix for another because you need to focus on something else and open your eyes to different things and to find answers for challenges. Like that's what those holes are. And sometimes the religion helps you find those things. It's very generalized why I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Okay? It's not a negative thing, trading one fix for another. But as you transition out, you got to find something. Some people go into fitness, guys that are in prison, some of them are in the best shape of their life. Why?
Anybody that you'll see. Yeah.
Because they have the time, but it's psychological too, because they need that distraction. They need that focus on something. Otherwise, how do you not, you're locked in a box.
Yeah.
Most of the day, for every day, for years. If you don't have you need purpose. If you don't have purpose, then, open them up.
Well, if you look at the prison environments, it's almost like an enforced monastic situation.
Yeah.
And it honestly, in a counterintuitive way, stuff like prison or boot camp or times when decisions and distractions are taken away from you by an outside force, make it easier to develop good habits and discipline.
Yeah.
Right? Like none of my drill sergeants ever asked me if I wanted to do anything.
Right.
It was not a question. Right? Like I was informed about what was eventually going to happen. The only choice that I had involved in that process was that sometimes I could have some say in how much crap I had to go through to get whatever the drill sergeant told me I was going to do done.
Yeah.
Not all the time. Sometimes life just sucks and you've got to eat it up and everything. But like, it's the same in prison. Like the corrections officers usually don't ask you to do things. Push-ups are just a way to pass the time. You don't have HBO Max to binge watch, Game of Thrones. Like what Daenerys Targaryen got up to this week is beyond your purview at this time.
Yeah.
But you have to find something to fill the time.
Suffering is one of the greatest teaching tools of life, and forced suffering, like in boot camp. I mean, Marines would not be the effective fighting force that they are if they did not have such a brutal boot camp.
I don't know. You guys started out pretty effective as a bunch of drunk guys at Sun Tavern. So,
I was talking with some friends today about different movies that depicted different conflicts in history. And one of the ones I did not bring up was Full Metal Jacket. The boot camp segment of that movie is the closest that I've ever seen of realistically depicting what happens in boot camp.
Yeah.
And I know when I was in, they started with the mama's core kind of thing. Oh, don't swear at them and what have you. I mean, look, that negativity, that brutality that they were doing shaped us. And that's one thing. I can't speak for the other branches. But if there's one thing that the Marines does, it brings out who you are inside. I've seen the toughest, badass wannabes from New York, New Jersey, and be the first ones to sit there and fail, the first ones to run out of the gas chamber when we were getting gassed, okay? And it was those quiet guys that were the series honor man, were the guys that just surprised everyone and they were just doing good at different things. And it just, if you are a strong person inside, they're going to bring that out. If you're strong on the inside but not strong on the outside, you're going to bring that out. You bring that strongness out and bring that leadership quality that you have in you. That's what I got out of the Marines. It pulled the leadership qualities that I had inside onto the outside. Where the guys that are all the tough guys, it just showed how weak they were inside, and they were not leaders. And it gave you a mindset that you were the greatest thing since sliced bread, and literally you're at the right and the left hand of God in a sense. You're an instrument of God, so it's kind of propaganda in a sense, but it's good because it gives you so much confidence to be more than what you were before, but also it gives you the mindset that you can do things that you never imagined you can do. And that's what they need Marines to do, because Marines are killers. So go into combat, you're going to be suffering unbearably depending on the situation. And you need to do unspeakable things. And I'm not glorifying it. It's a reality. We need to understand that our warfighters are supposed to go and blow stuff up. They're supposed to go kill people. But they're also supposed to win the hearts and minds and give kids chocolates or help put the water back on. In Iraq.
Now they are. Historically, that was not part of our job until like afterwards. And it was just, we have too many guys enlisted right now. We need to find something for you guys to do. Why don't you go build something?
But I think that was a good thing that came out of GWAT is it gave, the Marines in particular, I don't know about the Army, it gave us a broader toolbox. I mean, I didn't experience because I was not in during GWAT, but just outside looking in, it gave a broader toolbox for the Marines to be able to do more than just be a killing machine. And to go in and help people, and at the same time, without weakening the abilities of the Marines for their primary purpose. That's the point I'm trying to make. They were able to, do both things. They were able to take on an added set of tools and skills without sacrificing their main mission.
Yeah. Well, you can see that a lot in, you know, the term that I've heard is mission drift or mission bloat or organizational bloat. The farther an organization or a group gets away from its core purpose and values, its main mission, the more their ability to do that mission becomes diluted.
Yeah.
And that's, if you look at some of the interviews with the current defense secretary, he's been very blatant about, hey, I want an across the board standard. And our job is to go places, kill people that we find there that are bad guys, and break their stuff. I mean, like, all the other stuff is secondary, but we need to reprioritize from nation building and globalism and hearts and minds and hug the babies and kiss the puppies and hand out candy and, having service members get together by the unit and doing a walk in her shoes to raise awareness for like sexual assault and gender inequalities by having everyone wear high heels while they're in uniform and have to go through and walk. And yeah, the Marines had to do some of that stuff too. Yeah. So he's like, we're going to get away from that and we're going to go back to the main mission. And then if we have anything extra, we can do some of these other things.
Yeah.
And mission bloat and mission growth is not necessarily a bad thing. It happened with this podcast, Yeah. Let's talk about some simple growth opportunities that people have related to combatives, personal fitness, nutrition, firearms, and impact tools.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there was some value in the rabbit trail that we went down. But just like in real life, when you're running a military, you got to return to the main mission every once in a while and get back on track. And if you lose that for too much, I mean, we said we wanted to stay to about an hour. We're at an hour 32, but we could easily have been 3.5 hours and had a much bigger static to signal ratio.
Yes.
Versus where we're at now.
Yeah. Well, our mission creep has been cut off. No, like I said earlier, we were trying to shorten these videos down and put them out more frequently and more focused and stuff to try to give you guys a different aspect and see how you guys like it. But great conversation tonight. Thank you, Aaron. It was good stuff. And look forward to seeing everybody next time. And you guys have a great week. All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Now, please remember to like and subscribe and share with your friends. We will see you next time.